We all know that the world is hard for trans people. We all know the hatred and discrimination that gets funneled our way constantly. It's a constant flow of bigotry and malice that we experience, especially from the government making ruling decisions that only attempt to enact our erasure. All to say, there's a lot of open transphobia that happens that nearly anyone can identify as such. But that's not what this video is going to be about. That's not what I want to talk about today. I want to talk about things that signal to me, a trans woman, that show that people who try to proclaim themselves as cis allies don't actually care about us and only do it because they don't want to be seen as a bad person. Now, if someone does one of these things, does that mean that they hate trans people? Not necessarily for all of them, at least. But it does signal to me that they have a lot more learning to do. If you're trans and don't immediately recognize some of the potential harm of the things that I'm talking about as well, that's entirely okay. I'm giving my perspective of these subtle harms to better educate people of what to watch out for themselves as well, especially since a lot of these harms can come across as well intended on a face value. I'll be discussing these harms in no particular order, as I feel it's very counterproductive to try to rank what's deemed as the most harmful when it comes to dealing with this kind of bigotry. However, I have tried my best to try to keep topics that are similar grouped together, with the three main categories being not viewing, in my case, trans women as women, not viewing trans people as people, and attempts to demonize all trans people. To start, one of the more common ways of being transphobic is by what almost feels like begrudgingly attempting to allow trans people in your space in a very harmful way. The best example I can give of this are places that proclaim themselves as quote-unquote extremely trans accepting, but then use wording such as this place is for women and women identifying people. When a cis person does this signals to me that they, whether consciously or not, see a divide that places us outside of the label of women for them. They can't just put us in the women label because they don't truly see us as women. They see us as something different entirely. While my journey of being a woman and being trans is something unique, I'm still a woman, not just someone who's woman identifying. Not to mention that those basically mean the exact same thing, so they're quite simply just finding a way to other me in any way that they can. However, someone can feel aligned in the direction of womanhood themselves without being a woman. This isn't what I'm talking about, nor is this an issue in the slightest. I'm referring to those cis people who think that women identifying people makes their space more inclusive for trans women, when in fact it does the opposite. Another type of othering, and one that might seem a little less harmful at first, is cis people referring to me as trans woman as one word rather than two. This plays into what was previously discussed in that no matter what, they simply cannot just see me as a woman. They don't view the term as what it is, an adjective to describe what kind of woman I am. They see trans women as an entirely separate category that needs to be isolated from the label women as much as possible. This becomes especially relevant when you see them use phrases such as women and trans women, showing their view that they don't and refuse to view us as who we are, women. This type of mindset can continue even further though. Take the common phrase that I'm sure many of you all have heard. It suddenly becomes extremely easy for bigots to use they-them pronouns for someone as soon as that person is trans, no matter what that person's pronouns are. For instance, my pronouns are she-her, and she-her exclusively. I've discussed my long journey through gender in a previous video, and I know that I don't like they-them. This is misgendering me. If someone genuinely truly does not know my pronouns and doesn't have a means of finding out, that's different. But I do try to list my pronouns literally everywhere I can to make that as easy as possible for everyone. Because they-them also gives me dysphoria. Although not to the same degree as he-him, it can still really hurt. This is to say, they-them is not a part of my pronouns, nor has it been for a long time. But quote-unquote allies find a way to use they-them for me in any way possible sometimes, showing that they only reserve she-her for people they truly see as women, which is additionally harmful considering pronouns don't equate to gender. Any gender can use any pronouns. They again have a divide in their minds they refuse to get rid of that stops them from seeing me as who I am, a woman. And then sometimes after this, after being misgendered because they don't view us as quote-unquote woman enough, whatever that even means, we'll get hit with the, well, you definitely do that like a woman, which is so condescending and so transphobic, bigoted, and in this case, misogynistic. There's no way to act like any gender. Your gender is you. Inherently, anything that you do is something like your gender would do. In my case, every action that I do is something that a woman would do, because I'm a woman and I'm doing it. It also shows that they view certain actions as less woman than others, and are categorizing women into a misogynistic box in their mind that no one should dare try to push the boundaries of. It's regressive and offensive, and comes across as more open transphobia than the other things here, and it's definitely worth mentioning because of the harm it does. The previous topics can apply to any gender, but I specifically chose it happening to trans women because I'm a trans woman. But now I want to move into some statements that are directed towards every single trans person always. The first, and one that I've been hit with recently, is the debate or mindset that trans people are something to like and dislike versus just supporting us as people. I've recently been hit with a statement from someone I'd never talked to before, first time chat in my chat, that was, I like trans people. Good, you should. Everyone should. But saying that as a first time chat feels to me that you believe that trans people are something to be liked or disliked. And yes, many people do dislike and hate us, but just saying the inverse of what they're saying isn't exactly enough. We need genuine support. I do think of all the topics in this video, this is probably the one with the least amount of inherent harm behind it, but something about it can't stop bothering me. I feel the impression of saying you like something leaves open the okayness for someone to dislike that something, whether intentional or not. I say I like Celeste's gameplay. If someone else doesn't like Celeste's gameplay, I don't care. More Celeste for me. And with the inverse, I dislike pineapple on pizza. It's entirely okay if someone likes pineapple on pizza, more pineapple on pizza for them. I'm happy for them. To boil down the idea of trans people to like versus dislike rather than what it actually is, supporting or erasing us, feels close to an erasure itself. Even if the statement is intended positively, which again, for the statement I like trans people, I assume very much is. It just leads me to an opportunity to discuss better means of support, because implications for what that statement gives could be really bad. It's also one of those statements which, from cis people, feels like it's gonna come with a but after, which is an entirely separate conversation in itself, because that but most often leads to direct transphobia. See my last video for a really major example of this, where I talked about something related to this in a lot more detail. A lot of people also feel a need to debate our existence or police how us trans people feel about terms used towards us. ACAB includes that transphobic cop in your head, by the way. I think a really big instance of this that I get hit with a lot is being referred to as dude, man, or bro. While a lot of people may see these terms as gender neutral, I don't treat them as such for myself. If another trans femme doesn't get bothered by them, that's entirely fine. However, for me, these are misgendering, and I let people know that I don't like them. The main topic of this, though, isn't getting called those, it's the reaction of the person that I'm calling out to not call me those. It's always some defensive, but I call everyone those, or, oh, but I mean it gender neutrally. Cool, and my brain doesn't take it as such towards myself. I'm uncomfortable by it, and that should be enough for you to stop. Stop trying to justify doing something that harms me just because you're used to doing it. People trying to judge trans people for how they go about their existence, what terms they feel comfortable with, and fighting back against their oppressors, cis people, is full of nothing but harm. It's come to a point where a lot of cis people are trying to police us on even using the word cis to refer to them, which is done in an effort to, again, try to establish themselves as the quote-unquote normal category, while leaving us as the quote-unquote other category. Marginalized groups are allowed to fight back against their oppressors however they see fit. Although, cis is literally just a term for people who aren't trans, but they love to see some inherent harm behind it and treat it as a slur because that's how they view the word trans. Also, since I used this term in the last section, I do want to touch on the term trans femme and how it's not the same as trans woman. I am a trans woman and I am trans femme. However, there are plenty of trans femmes who are not women. They simply relate to femininity in some way or feel the label of trans femme as itself or as an adjective is correct in portraying part of their identity while not being a woman. A lot of people will try to lump these identities together because they want to try to force people into boxes that don't exist, and it creates an erasure of so many genders and so many individual identities. People who are trans femme are not inherently women. I'm trans femme and I'm a woman, but not everyone is. This also nicely leads into the final point of this section, that some people will only accept us if we do things the exact way they want us to. We're not allowed to be ourselves unless being ourselves is exactly the box they have so harmfully placed in their mind. Not to bring it up twice, but again, the last video I made discussed this in a lot more detail. It often becomes a scenario they find any way they can to make sure we don't fit into the box they have, simply because they see us as different, and therefore anything we do must also inherently be different to them. They feel that we should just act in line with a society that actively pushes against us, that actively wants us gone, and they willfully ignore the amount of harm that would cause. It's hard to go against mitigating these kinds of transphobia, because sometimes when we call it out, we get labeled as the oh-so-angry trans person who has to have everything to be their way, when ultimately all we're asking for is to be treated like people, be treated as who we are, and not be outcasts even further in a society that harms us so heavily. The way that I handle it, though, is still to call it out directly when I see it happen. Call it out as the open transphobia that it is. It's sadly happened to me enough where I can let stuff like this, and all transphobia in general pointed directly at me, roll off my back and not let it affect me. But I do think for those who don't have that ability, that properly being able to identify why these statements feel so bad to you is a major step of getting towards making the situation better. You're allowed to have boundaries, and are especially allowed to enforce your boundaries when transphobia is directed your way, subtle or not. I also know that some people may not have the privilege of safety to call out transphobia that happens to them, especially in real life. I'm in a very similar boat. In cases like that, I'll always either message or call somebody that I know sees me as me so that I can let the dysphoria dissipate faster. Also, to any cis people watching this is another reason why it's so important to help us trans people out. Sometimes we're put in almost contradictory scenarios where we can't defend ourselves for our safety. There are many areas where us specifically creating an issue can lead to harm or much, much worse. So do what you can to help out all trans people. The very last thing I want to talk about in this video is a topic that's been attacked a lot and isn't subtle transphobia at all, but it's one that I feel is necessary to discuss. Trans people are often demonized at every single nonsensical angle for anything that we do. And supporting trans kids is especially one of those things. Trans kids exist, trans kids will always exist, and people like trans kids have always existed. I knew I was trans from the earliest parts of my life. As much as you want to erase it, or us for acknowledging that, it'll be us who end up on the right side of history. Kids should have access to queer resources, to trans resources, to educate themselves, if not for themselves, for how to properly treat others so they don't grow up bigoted like those who are attacking us. Puberty blockers work and are an effective and necessary means of trans healthcare, and are not the only means of trans healthcare that kids need. If you're old enough to go through puberty, you're old enough to decide if that's the puberty you want to go through or if you want to go through a different puberty. I'm writing the script soon after the US Supreme Court has announced the decision to ban all gender-affirming care for trans youth, so it's especially relevant right now. It's baffling for us to be demonized on wanting the generation that comes after us to have an easier time than we did. For wanting those who come after us to not go through all the hate, vitriol, and dysphoria they may experience with their body as we did. And for people to have an easier time through life. Support trans people, support trans kids. This topic is the least subtle of the ones I've talked about, but given the state of the world right now, I can't just be silent. Especially when it feels like anyone who speaks up about this is met with such violent attacks from fascists. It's openly transphobia to demonize us for caring, no matter what other false terms transphobes use to describe it. Trans rights are human rights, and that's never going to change. I hope that this discussion has opened your eyes to some ways that transphobia can exist without it being openly blatant to everyone. And if these were all things that you had actively thought about before, I hope this shows you that you're not alone in the fight for trans liberation and for a better future for everyone. If you have any more instances of subtle transphobia that I didn't touch on, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you for watching, everyone. But before you go, some people who know me on YouTube have found me on Twitch lately and told me they had no idea that I streamed. So this is your reminder that if you want to hear more conversations like this, go follow me on Twitch, where I talk about this kind of stuff a lot. I'm going to be discussing in an upcoming video just how much that support helps me because of the dangerous scenario that I'm in, and how creating videos and streaming are the only ways I'll be able to get out and be able to truly be safe. So when I say your support means the world, I truly mean it. Thank you, everyone, and thank you for 7,000 subs. As cliche as it is to say, like, does anybody ever expect that many people to be interested in the words they're saying? I know I certainly didn't, and I'm forever thankful that many people are interested in the discussions I want to bring to the platform. I love and appreciate you all, and if you haven't heard it yet today, I'm proud of you.